uplifting and celebrating Palestinian struggle for justice and critiquing racism and injustice. Today, you'll hear from the book's editors about the beauty of Palestinian culture, about the attacks on teaching about Palestine at local and national events, curricular possibilities to teach about Palestine, and the importance of solidarity and movement building for justice. But first, we are so incredibly honored to be joined by activists and musician Macklemore. Thank you so much for your support, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you today.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you having me and everyone having me here today. And first and foremost, just a big congratulations. I know you guys put in a ton of time, energy, love into this book, and it's a beautiful tool. It's a beautiful moment to celebrate this. And a brief backstory of my experience in the last 19 months is I knew nothing about Palestine. I didn't grow up with any information. I knew of it. I didn't know any history. And October 7th happened and it changed uh, my life forever. It was a complicated issue that I was told was too complicated for me to really even understand, that it was so complicated that I shouldn't look into it. And as the days went on from October 7th, I started learning about the 75 years before and what led to that. Um, and it was a awakening. Palestine has served as an awakening for me and my own heart. I couldn't watch the videos coming out of Gaza, um, and not be moved. I couldn't see children in rubble that were the same age as my kids day after day and be silent. And it built up in me throughout that October of 23 to the point that I finally said, you know what, regardless of what happens here, I have to say something. I have to do something with the platform that I have. And and since then I haven't looked back and I haven't looked away. And I think that for those of us that are fortunate enough to feel compassion and empathy and a deep knowing that this is wrong, that we need to do something, it's rekindles hearts. It's not even, and I think for me, I don't know really what I'm supposed to talk about, but I'm just gonna speak. So bear with me here. I think for me, um, in the midst of the most pain, in the midst of the most suffering, what it has reminded me of is resilience. The Palestinian fight for liberation is a fight for collective liberation. And it is advocacy that has connected me back to what it means to be human and fighting for the most marginalized, of stepping up. And one of the ways that we step up is we are storytellers. We are all storytellers. And we are seeing right now in the media and with law enforcement and with policies coming out of our nation's capital, we are being silenced. Our stories are being silenced. The truth is being silenced. Words are co-opted. Hatred is rampant, and divisive nature comes next. And I I know that this is a time that we will look back in history as a pivotal moment of us stepping up to the forefront as truth tellers, as people that are not going to be subjected to a false narrative, narratives of any sort of hatred or anti-Semitism or anything but rooted in love. And what that is what this movement is actually all about. That is what the history is all about. It is telling the truth. It is moving forward with dignity that all human beings deserve, that all human beings deserve to be respected the same in this precious life that we have, and ensuring that the Palestinians that are going through this genocide at this moment will not, their stories will be told, and that we will do everything in our power to fight the erasure, the ethnic cleansing, and the genocide that is taking place today. And I commend everyone that put in time. I commend everyone on whatever this Zoom is. People that are actually coming together in community and talking and having conversations around how can we step up in this moment. In the last 19 months, it has been an emotional roller coaster for me, and I know for so many, it's designed that way, right? It's designed that we feel fatigued, that we feel defeated, that we don't know what to do. And um I know for me, being in community is such an important piece of feeling like I'm not alone on my phone scrolling without hope. Because again, that is what that's what it's designed to be. And and there is hope. And even though you can find a million things to be to be absolutely gutted over, I think that when we come together and we realize like my heart is not the only one that has been illuminated by Palestine. There are millions and millions and millions of people that did not know about the Nakba in the last 76 years of oppression um, before the last 19 months. So it has really opened up the eyes of so many, and I know that this book is going to just be ripples of that change to teach our young kids, to teach our young youth. Um, my son and I, every night we pray for Palestine. Every night we pray for Palestine. Every night I talk to him about what happened today. He's 3.5 years old. He knows. And I don't say that to pat myself on the shoulder. I say that because that's an important part of parenting, right? What books are we reading to our kids? And I'm excited to read this with my 10-year-old. I'm excited to have these conversations, to talk about ways of mobilization, to look at social justice movements of the past and how they move to actually implement change. So it starts with education first and foremost. That's what they're trying to eradicate. They're trying to make sure that these books are banned. Jesse knows better than anyone, and and we can't let it happen. So, um, that's my kickoff. I don't know if I hit on any of the points I was supposed to, but as I said before, I appreciate your guys' commitment to this work for being the storytellers and ensuring that this next generation is going to know what's actually been going on since the Nakba.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow. Hope, community, activism, solidarity, looking at movements for justice, and continuing to think about the futures, right? The futures that we are building together. And your words have reminded me and touched my heart to think about all of the different ways that we can be deeper in community and all of the conversations that we can continue to have, and how education really is at the heart and at the root of this, and how we can dream about what new futures are possible and how we can teach for those new futures. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We deeply appreciate you. We appreciate your work. We appreciate how you use storytelling and your art to bring light to. And we're so excited to continue on to kick off this conversation with the editors of the book. I'm feeling really fired up. I'm feeling really fueled for this conversation. And y'all are in for a treat to continue to hear from folks about the book, to hear from editors about the book. And I'm first going to turn to Samia Showman. So Samia, welcome. Samia is a California native with Palestinian roots and has dedicated the last 24 years of her career in public education to promoting racial and social justice in the classroom and broader educational organizations that she's worked with. She's the co-coordinator of the Middle East Children's Alliance's Teach Palestine project and has developed curriculum and published various articles focused on teaching Palestine. And so, Samia, I want to start with Palestinian culture and history and beauty and really situate us there, because that's been suppressed in US media and in education. So, can you tell us about the beautiful parts of Palestinian culture that every educator, that every student should know about, and also how organizations like the Middle East Children's Alliance and the Teach Palestine Project, how this book can really help bring light to these conversations in the classroom?
Thank you, Sarah. It's an honor to be in virtual community with everyone here, my co-editors, the panelists, and I want to thank everyone who made this book come to life because it takes a lot of people. Um, And I'm going to say, on the first question around, the beautiful part of Palestinian culture, I could take up the whole webinar talking about how beautiful our culture is, but I'm going to highlight two things and I'm going to center joy. And I'm going to center joy because I want people to remember that we are more than our grief and we are more than what is happening to us. And I think sometimes that gets overshadowed. So I'm going to start with talking about a cultural value that anchors the Palestinian community. And I saw someone put it in the chat earlier, and that is samud. And samud means steadfastness. And it comes up as a theme in the book a lot. Um, Samud is about patience. It's about believing. It's about commitment to our cause and one day knowing we will be free and we will experience liberation, if not in my lifetime, in my own kids. You see Samud in Gaza when every day they're pushing to live even amongst the forced starvation that's happening. You see it in the West Bank with the constant incursions into villages. And you see it here in the United States with students starting encampments and the nonviolent protests happening. And you see it every day in Palestinians like me who wake up and go to work and go through their day getting what they need to get done with their heads held up high, while our hearts are breaking and doing the best we can to do honorable work and be positive community members so that people know who we are, and how that we also contribute, regardless of what the media tries to portray us as. So I'll start with that, that cultural value of Samud. And then the second thing I'd like to uplift is our arts, and specifically our poetry, because I think, and Macklemore talked about this a lot around narratives and, arts and how you can tell our stories and how important it is. And Palestinians forever have produced beautiful prose. And this book has a lot of examples of this. And the poetry sometimes tells our history, sometimes it tells our heartbreak, sometimes it is talking about our joy and everything in between. And it's been a really different and creative way to document our narratives and connect our experiences to other groups. And of course, you can add to poetry, right? Our music, our tetris, our embroidery, our food, and all of the things Palestinians have produced over time and the way it's evolved, right? And all the new kind of styles it's taken um, to put our beautiful culture on display for the world. And then in terms of the second question around Mecca's Teach Palestine project, and the work we've done around Palestine, for me, I've been in public education for a long time, but being part of the Teach Palestine project is one of the most meaningful things I have ever been a part of. Most of that is personal. Um, I grew up never having an opportunity to talk about who I was or my identity or to learn about Palestine or even the rest of the Arab world in my K-12 education. I'm born and raised in California. And anything that was mentioned about Palestine, the Middle East, the Arab world was usually negative and very stereotypical. So then I hid who I was because of that. And I just wanted to follow the norms and, fit in kind of this white supremacist culture. And I started or jumped into the Teach Palestine work because I didn't want other kids to feel like that. And when I had kids, I also didn't want them to feel like that. And I think it's also really important, besides for Palestinian Arab kids, for non-Palestinian or Arab kids to learn about Palestine, all of us. And what's happened there, how it's impacted and influenced our life, and the lives we lead, and all the beautiful things about our culture. So Teach Palestine started many, many years ago as a way to support educators in bringing Palestine into the classroom, and much more than just the history classroom, but all classrooms. And sometimes that doesn't mean being like, oh, here's, let's teach a lesson about Palestine. How about we ask a question that allows a kid to talk about where they're from or their heritage, regardless of that. A lot of people were reaching out for help, and more so, this has grown over the last 19, months, and really this kind of project of repression. So educators and educator leaders were looking to grow their own knowledge on Palestine and what's happened. Some had never really been aware before they felt comfortable teaching about Palestine. So really our project's been about how do we create opportunities for Palestinian youth to see themselves in curriculum, for educators to learn about Palestine, tie it to other movements and issues, for example, environmental justice. How can you be teaching about environmental justice? There's so many things, right, that you can take from Palestine around that. So as a project, we've taken that on. We've created lessons and highlighted the work other people have done around teaching Palestine. It's really kind of a depository, or we try to curate. It's continuing to be ongoing work. We have amazing people who have worked on our project, but we have a fabulous new co-coordinator, and she has brought so much new energy and knowledge and tech savviness to the project. So we have new materials online. We have a new website. We're working on a few bigger projects to really help educators and educational leaders, administrators deal with these projects of repression, suppression, oppression. I know, Teach Palestine was dropped in the chat, so you can sign up for like our mailing list to get monthly updates. And then we welcome contributors. So we are very fortunate that some of those lessons are highlighted in the book.
Thank you so much, Samia. We're really grateful for the work of Teach Palestine and how it's really set a foundation for the book and for the book to turn into this project and study groups and for people to really engage wholeheartedly with the text. And thanks so much for centering us in humanity and beauty and joy and Samud. It was lovely to learn about Palestinian culture. Thank you. So grateful for you. Next, I'd like to invite Jesse Hagopian. Jesse is a Rethinking Schools editor. He's campaign director. It's an education project and author of the newest book, Teach Truth, The Struggle for Anti-Racist Education. So, Jesse, you wrote a piece called Israel's War on Gaza is also a war on history, education, and children. So can you talk about the intersections of the attacks on teaching truthful history with teaching about Palestine? And then can you also talk about international solidarity movements with Palestine? Because I know that you've been really involved in organizing to really support international solidarity movements.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you for that. It's such an honor to be here today with all the editors of this book, with everyone who's joined us, with all the teachers who have come here to learn how to be part of this struggle and how to teach the truth about Palestine. And thank you to Macklemore, using your platform to be a voice for the occupied and oppressed, and for reminding us what art is supposed to be. Not a mirror for the comfortable, but a megaphone for the silenced. And that's really what I've seen you do over the last year plus here. And it's been truly moving, despite the blowback and consequences. Continuing to push helps me continue to fight. So thank you for that. And yeah, I wrote the piece called Israel's War on Gaza is also a war on history, education, and children, because what we're witnessing is not only a military assault, it's not only a genocide, it's also an epistemic assault and a form of epistemicide. And what I mean by that is that Israel isn't just targeting homes and hospitals and schools, it's targeting memory, it's targeting curriculum, and the right to narrate one's own history. So I think that Israel is trying to annihilate the past, the present, and the future of people. And it wants to not only destroy the Palestinians, but also destroy any historical record that they existed, that they resisted, right? And that's the work that we're doing right now, is to ensure that that never happens. And if the Palestinians haven't given up in that struggle, how could we? And this connects directly to the broader right-wing war on education that I write about in my book, Teach Truth. And many of us have been organizing in that Teach Truth movement here in the US. These are laws that are banning teaching about structural racism, about colonialism, about gender justice, and they don't exist in a vacuum, these laws. They're part of a coordinated strategy to suppress truth, to dismantle resistance, and to protect systems of power. And the attacks on critical race theory, on DEI, the attacks on educators who dare to teach the truth about race, gender, or sexuality, right? These attacks, including firings, suspensions, and investigations, these are all part of the same playbook that's being used to attack those who are teaching about Palestine. And what's stunning to me is the hypocrisy. The same Trump administration that howls about student protests against genocide being anti Semitic. This is the guy who called the fascists who marched in Charlottesville, the fascists who chanted, "Jews will not replace us." He called them very fine people, right? You have Elon Musk, who makes a Hitler salute at the inauguration and faces no consequences, but students who call for a ceasefire are arrested, expelled, and labeled as anti-Semitic, right? This is what's happening in our schools around the country. We can see just how deep and dangerous this agenda is by looking at people like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Under his so-called Stop Woke Act, a school banned Anne Frank's diary, the graphic adaptation, right? So let's just sit with that for a moment. They banned a book about a Jewish child hiding from Nazis. And his administration also banned two different textbooks on the Holocaust. And while DeSantis is censoring Holocaust education, he zealously supports Israel's genocide of Palestinians. He's called for banning Palestinian refugees from entering the U.S. and proudly sent weapons and ammunition from Florida to aid Israel's assault on Gaza. And at the same time, he banned Students for Justice in Palestine from college campuses. Uh, because when students organize against genocide, the state's response is repression. We've seen that over and over again. And the strategy that DeSantis is employing is really straight out of Christopher Rufo's textbook, one of the architects of this anti-truth movement. And Christopher Rufo put their goals plainly. He said this: conservatives need to, quote, create a strong association between Hamas, Black Lives Matter, DSA, and academic decolonization. Then attack, delegitimize, discredit, make them political untouchables, unquote. Right? So the goal is to conflate liberation movements with terrorism, right? The goal is to conflate student protests against genocide with anti-Semitism, and to make anyone who stands up for Palestinians toxic in the public square. And this strategy doesn't just erase Palestine, it also endangers Jewish people, because by falsely labeling any criticism of Israel as anti-Semitism, they entwine the global Jewish diaspora with war crimes of a state. And that's not protection. Let's be clear about that. That is not supporting Jewish people. And the Jewish people themselves are proclaiming this in larger numbers than ever before. Right? Jewish activists across the country and around the world have made this clear. And I just want to say, I think there is great hope with solidarity. Sierra asked about the solidarity movement. And I think that our solidarity with Palestine is not just symbolic. It's not just a matter of sentiment. I believe that our solidarity with Palestine is a matter of cold, hard fact, because the same government that funds bombs to bomb schools in Gaza is defunding education right here at home. Right? Trump is cutting food stamps for families in the US at the same time our tax taxpayer dollars are being used to starve children in Gaza. So we are forced into a brutal solidarity because we're both under attack by the same powerful people, right? Trump wants to ban any lessons on race, gender, and sexuality in American classrooms while buying the bombs that are obliterating Palestinian classrooms. Our solidarity is not just because we are moral people who want to support Palestinians, but because that's our only salvation. That's our only hope at our own liberation. So when we say teaching Palestine is teaching truth, we mean teaching Palestine is about teaching solidarity. And I'll just say quickly that I had a chance to go to Palestine in 2011 with um, the first African heritage delegation of Eyewitness Palestine. And I went with many older Black folks who were veterans of the civil rights movement. And getting to see Palestine through their eyes taught me about what solidarity means. And it taught me about what the situation in Israel really is, because those veterans of the civil rights movement, a woman like Gloria, who was one of the first teachers to integrate a school in Mississippi in the 60s, she and others on the trip told me that what they saw in Israel was worse apartheid than what they faced in the Jim Crow South in America, right? And so when we talk about the need for international solidarity, it's not an abstract idea, it's a living, breathing force. When South Africa brought Israel to the International Court of Justice for genocide, it reminded the world that apartheid anywhere demands a global response. And that's what we're beginning to see around the world. Young people have been the moral compass of this movement, whether it's Palestinian students in Gaza risking their lives to attend class, or it's students in Atlanta getting suspended for organizing teach-ins in Palestine. These struggles are deeply connected, and it's our job as educators to help students see those connections, I believe.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for breaking it down for us. And thanks for also reminding us of the sparks of possibility that are everywhere, right? And learning from the young people, learning from the elders, right? All of the different ways that in this continued struggle for justice that we can be in solidarity, that we can support each other. And one of the things you always remind me is that one of the reasons why we are in this current moment that where there is such intense backlash is because they're afraid, right? The opposition is afraid because there's been a gradient in people again together. So thank you for reminding us of that. Appreciate you. Next, I'd like to editor of Rethinking Schools magazine. He taught high school social studies for over a decade in Portland, Oregon, New York City, and now in Philadelphia. He is the editor of Teaching a People's History of Abolition and the Civil War. So, Adam, there is a section in the book that helps to make clear what anti-Semitism is and what it is not. Can you talk a little bit more about this, especially within the local context of Philadelphia, especially as a lot of the backlash has been around anti-Semitism or saying it's been anti-Semitism in a progressive city like Philly? So what does the repression look like? And also what does the local organizing in solidarity with Palestine look like at the local level?
Yeah, so great to be with all of you today. Um, and I should say that this book is very much a product of the movement, right? That we couldn't have made this book 5 years ago. And it's really great, even to be back in the same Zoom room as all the editors. Last time we worked together was in Portland, putting together this book and really dreaming of it. And now it's the reality. So, to answer your first question, I just want to start. I don't know if I can hold this up if folks can see it, this beautiful spread in the book that opens the chapter Sierra was referring to, right? Because this is a beautiful photograph of a Jewish Voice for Peace protest at the Capitol to get our government to stop arming Israel. And there is now a conscious effort to get protests like these labeled as anti-Semitic, right? And I think we have to unequivocally state what I'm sure is obvious to most people on this call, which is that protesting Israel, being against Zionism, these things are not the same thing as being anti-Semitic, discriminating against Jews. This chapter opens with a really great primer by Nina Mehta and Donna Neville. Folks should use in their classroom that talks about what anti-Semitism is and is not, goes through it much more clearly and in a lot more detail than I have time for. But I'll just point out that before this current genocide, right, there was a 2020 Pew Research poll that found that nearly 1 in 6 Jews believed that caring about Israel was not important to being Jewish. That number increased to 1 in 4 amongst Jews under 30 and 1 in 3 among secular Jews. In fact, a year later, still before the current genocide, a poll by the Jewish Electorate Institute found that 38% of Jews under 40 agree that Israel is an apartheid state. So what is happening right now is one political viewpoint, Zionism, that ties Jewish safety to the land of Israel. This has been a minority viewpoint amongst Jews for the majority of Jewish history, but there's been an active propaganda campaign since the 1970s to get Jews like me to identify our safety, our identity with a country more than 6,000 miles away. And although that campaign has been successful over the several decades at winning more Jews to its cause, there still remains a significant minority and a growing minority of Jewish people in this country and around the world who disagree, right? Especially young Jews. And this is why many of us have been leading protests for a free Palestine. And this is also why Zionists, Jews and non-Jews, are freaking out right now, right? There is, to talk a little bit specifically about Philadelphia, there's actually this right-wing Zionist organization, which is holding an event outside of Philadelphia next week. I think they're probably too scared to hold it in Philadelphia. And I just wanted to read from their flyer because I thought it was really, instructive of what they're worried about and what Jesse and Sierra just said, right? They wrote at the beginning of their flyer to get people, riled up about this crisis of anti-Semitism. They wrote the depiction of Israel as a colonizer and oppressor in K-12 and college classrooms is fueling anti-Semitism. Recent polls reveal an alarming decline in sympathy for Israel amongst American youth. And when I read that, I just yes, that's right. That's clearly not the reaction they were going for. But, their interest, right, is in conflating anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel. And they are partnering with the most right-wing racists and actual anti-Semites to do that, right? So for Rethinking School, in Rethinking Schools, I detail how this is happening in Philadelphia. And you have partnerships between these right-wing Zionist Jewish organizations and pro-charter billionaires like Jeff Yass, who are paying for these mobile billboards to go outside of the schools where pro-Palestinian teachers teach at, right? And they're also partnering with organizations like the Deborah Project, which consciously bridges, the two, right? Their hopes of expanding the fight against teaching about racism and expanding the fight against teaching about Palestine, right? So they're very explicit about that. And that all these groups have attacked the key anti-racist educators in Philadelphia, right? Principally the Racial Justice Organizing Committee, where the National Black Lives Matter Week of Action originated. But it's not just Philly, right? Pro-Israel activists everywhere are helping to bring the war on teaching truth into blue cities that previously were untouched by campaigns against teaching about racism. And in Philadelphia, because we have a real business service model teachers union, they've been able to target individual educators, and the union has not really backed them up. In other places where they have more of a social justice union model, they've had to go after the whole teachers union, right? And so these pro-Israel activists are very much aligning themselves with the right-wing anti-union forces in education. And in some ways, at least the places where we have social justice unions, I think they're actually, I used to think that the university was the place where you had more academic freedom and you could kind of go. But I think actually some of the best places now are like Chicago, LA, where you actually have social justice teachers unions that are fighting back as a union. And when you, even where you don't, in Philly, we've pushed back. We've got a beautiful and still growing organization called Philadelphia Educators for Palestine that has sprouted up over the last year and a half to defend teachers under attack. And they have shown up, we have shown up at almost every school board meeting, protesting. And as a result of that organizing, right, teachers like Keziah Ridgway, who co-wrote an incredible lesson we have in the book on Black views in the civil rights movement on Palestine-Israel, right? She's back in the classroom thanks to the activism of folks in Philadelphia. And in places that have stronger unions like Chicago, I just interviewed the VP of the CTU for Rethinking Schools. They've really been able to defend teaching about Palestine and codify it in their new contract. Places like Los Angeles, they've even voted to divest recently, right? So I think it's important to say that despite intense levels of repression, K-12 educators in many ways have fought back against this and are in a better position to fight back because of the waves of struggle in education that we've seen over the last decade. And I just want to end by actually, quoting Donna and Nina from the end of their beautiful primer on what anti-Semitism is and what it isn't, because I think this is the different vision that we give in this chapter, right? And they say safety never goes from guns, checkpoints, walls, and a police state. True safety is built through forging solidarity with those fighting for a more just world.
Yes. Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate that. I appreciate you for taking us to the local level, giving us that context, but also thinking about across the United States, the what's actually happening in terms of the resistance and what that looks like and how there are some significant wins, right? And how that is possible because of the organizing that's happening, because of the teachers organizing. So thank you so much for sharing those stories and highlighting that for all of us. Appreciate you. Next, I'd like to welcome Bill Bigelow. Bill Bigelow is curriculum editor of Rethinking Schools magazine and author or co-editor of several Rethinking Schools books. He has written on teaching about Palestine-Israel for Rethinking Schools and the Zen Education Project, and co-directs the Zen Education Project on behalf of Rethinking Schools. So Bill, you've written a ton about curricular possibilities to teach about Palestine. Can you talk about one of the lessons that you have in the book?
I can, Sierra, but excuse me. But I want to. Adam showed that great spread from that chapter, and I just want to shout out for Nancy Zucker. Nancy is our art director at Rethinking Schools, and she just poured her heart into this book. And she contracted with illustrators and photographers around the world and did everything she could to kind of, have the look of the book amplify what we were trying to say with the text. And those of you who have the book, I hope everybody gets it and sees how beautiful it is. A lot of that is really, it's thanks to Nancy, who does such a magnificent job. So the lesson that I would like to talk about is called "Teaching the Seeds of Violence in Palestine-Israel." It's one that Susanna, it's hard for me to say Susanna because I call her Susie, but Susie and I taught at her high school in here in Portland last year, and the inspiration for it came from reading Rashid Khalidi's wonderful book, "The 100 Years' War on Palestine." And Khalidi begins with when Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire. And that's where the lesson begins too. And I actually think it's where our curriculum should start as well. So the lesson begins with in 1882 with the first Zionist immigration to Palestine and goes up to 1922 when the British Empire gets the mandate from the League of Nations to basically rule over Palestine. And the premise of the activity is that if we go back to this kind of 40-year period and we look deeply at it, that there are all kinds of through lines that we can see through today. The activity is a mixer activity. There's 17 roles. Students become different individuals. Some are Palestinians, some are Zionists, some none of the above, but have an important part to play. And through talking to each other, they surface all kinds of stories and the ideas that we try and land on what those stories mean for us today. And one of the first through line, I think, is Zionist movement's contempt for Palestinian life. And one of the individuals in the mixer is Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism. And Herzl refers to Palestinians as non-Jewish communities. And that erasure of Palestinians is consistent. That if you look at the Balfour Declaration in 1917, and Lord Balfour is one of the roles as well, it does the same thing. The British Mandate document does the same thing. It erases Palestinians. It wages war on their lives, basically. And one of the students, Susie and I asked students at the end to when we identify key through lines, what can we land on? And this one student writes, I think so much of this stems from the racism of not seeing Palestinians as people with rights. And that's just like a key through line that we want to land on with kids and that they can from this activity. Another through line, an obvious one, is Zionism's partnership with empire. That the success of Zionism is inexplicable without the partnership, first with the Ottoman Empire, then with the British Empire, and now, of course, with the U.S. Empire. And there's individuals in the mixer who kind of bring that to life for kids. There's one, Elias Sersuk was this incredibly wealthy landowner, lived in Beirut, essentially through Ottoman land laws, stole land from Palestinian peasants, and then partnered with Zionist land agents like Arthur Ruppin, who comes in and who buys Palestinian land, but buys it from an absentee landlord. And then they expel the Palestinians who've been living there for generations. And that is done first with the cooperation of the Ottoman Empire and Ottoman troops a lot of times, then with the cooperation, and well, more than the cooperation, with the gusto of the British Empire. And then, of course, it traces through to today. And as we know, that the genocide in Gaza is just impossible to imagine without the U.S. military support and with the diplomatic cover that the United States gives to Israel. But there's also more hopeful through lines. And Adam talked about this that the anti-Zionist Jews, that anti-Zionism begins with Zionism. And in the mixer, there are individuals who bring this to life. There's one, Yusuf Kastel, who is a Sephardic Jew, who writes eloquently about he lives in Jerusalem. He writes eloquently about the cooperation between Jews and Christians and Muslims, and also how Zionism is an attack on that cooperation. It's an attack on that future and how Zionism is a movement of segregation and domination and is eroding what they've built as Sephardic Jews with other people in Palestine. Another of the individuals in the mixer is Patty Kramer. She is part of the Jewish Bund. And of course, the Jewish Bund, this massive revolutionary movement in Europe. It's socialist, it's it's revolutionary, it's and it's anti-Zionist, and a fighter for Jewish rights. But Patty Kramer and others see Zionism as really as an attack on what they're doing, that they're trying to fight for better lives where they are. And our struggle is not in Palestine, they say. Our struggle is right here. And so it's that choice between fight or flight. And Patty Kramer says that the fight is in Europe, not in Palestine. And then, finally, that it is so important for kids to recognize that Palestinian resistance, it does not start in 1947. It does not start in the 30s. It starts back in the very beginning land dispossession that they're victims of. And so there's, in the mixer activity, there's Palestinian peasants, there's officials who ally with the peasants, and there's also Palestinian journalists, Najib Nasser and Isa al-Isa, who is going to have to correct my pronunciation, but is editor of Philistine. And he writes, and this is in 1914, he writes, we are a nation threatened with disappearance by the Zionist tide in this Palestinian land, a nation which is threatened in its very being with expulsion from its homeland. And so I think that our curriculum needs to do what Rashid Khalidi does, and that's to start the struggle, to look at this as a struggle of dispossession that begins way back more than 100 years ago. And it's a struggle, it's the Palestinian story of dispossession and resistance. And that is absolutely crucial for us to leave with our students.
Yes, thank you so much, Bill. And I was pulling up the lesson to give folks a description a bit of what it looks like, and it has maps on it and pictures that accompany all of the descriptions. And so wanting to just lift that up for the educators that are calling in to really think about the different ways that we can incorporate these conversations, this history, into the classroom. Because when we introduce students to the history, in many ways they're finding it themselves, right? They're asking those questions and wanting to know themselves. When we create space for those conversations and they're able to make the connections between history and what's currently happening. So thanks so much for this lesson, for all of the other work, but also for highlighting for us this history. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate you. Next, I'd like to invite Susanna. Susanna Kassouf teaches social studies in Portland Public Schools. She's a contributor to the Zen Education Project and Rethinking Schools. And she's on the editorial board of the forthcoming Rethinking Schools book, Teaching Environmental Justice, and a co-founder of Sunrise Movement PDX. So, Susie, you've been involved in a lot of organizing, a lot of activism across different movements for justice. So can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of building solidarity across different movements for justice?
Yes, thank you, Sierra. And I just want to start by saying I'm so honored to be here, to be on this panel, to be part of this book. I just think that this book is kind of going to be an invaluable resource, not just for educators, but also for people who are in the movement fighting for Palestinian liberation. So I'm just so honored to be a part of it. Okay, so I love this question because I think that it is so important for us to remember that Palestinian liberation is not, oh no, my dog's barking. Okay. See if my husband gets. So Palestinian liberation, it's not like a single issue existing in a vacuum. I think sometimes this struggle can feel really isolating because of this like Palestinian exception or the Palestine exception, where we have these otherwise progressive spaces that then decide to actively suppress and silence and even punish those of us who advocate for Palestinian human rights. I know for many of us educators, we can be in schools that are so supportive of us teaching about systemic racism or so supportive of us teaching about gender justice, but when it comes to Palestinian human rights, we get shut down. Even us, like in my own school, I had a teacher who was told to take down a sign that said Palestinian lives matter when our district has explicitly said that we can say Black Lives Matter. So that exception can feel so isolating. But the reality is that to stand with Palestine is just to recognize that the forces that are driving the occupation there, colonialism, racialized capitalism, militarized borders, these are the same forces that are oppressing Black communities here and around the world and oppressing indigenous nations, migrants, queer and trans folks, and so many others, all the other types of injustices that we as justice-focused educators teach about in our classrooms. Like the weapons in Gaza are tested in Ferguson. Many high-ranking police officers and officials routinely travel to Israel to receive training from the Israeli Defense Forces, and they exchange tactics and technologies with each other. I was reading this article the other day about how Trump is trying to almost create like two different legal systems, the way that many fascist authoritarian regimes do, where all of these people who are immigrants who are here legally are being deported without any sort of trial, without any sort of due process. All these students who are here on student visas having their visas revoked, kind of creating this separate legal system for people that he doesn't like. That is so reminiscent of the fact that in the occupied territories, Palestinians are tried in military courts, which have a 99% conviction rate. While Israeli settlers who are in the West Bank are tried in Israeli civilian courts, this like separate system, right, for them. And, it's like the same tactics that the right is using to dehumanize migrants and dehumanize trans people and just like use them as a scapegoat so that they can do whatever they want to this country. That's the same tactics of dehumanization that are used to make us all try to believe that Palestinians are all somehow terrorists, all, Hamas, all blah, blah, blah. And this therefore justifies whatever is happening to them. But I think like even bigger than all of this is that at the core of all oppression is this perverted colonial lie that we are fundamentally separate from one another and from the land. And that separateness invites us then to dominate one another. Oh, well, if we don't dominate them, they're going to dominate us, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, it's just a cycle of one group dominating another, et cetera, et cetera. But many indigenous communities understand that that is a lie, that there is no separation between us and the earth. There is no separation between us and each other. Like Jesse was saying, it's like all, I cannot be free if you are not free, right? So like I come from the climate movement, like Sierra was saying, and I have found in the last 19 months that fighting for justice in Palestine has not asked me to step out of that struggle, but actually to step more deeply into it. Because it's the same logic that allows like children to be buried under the rubble in Rafah, allows fossil fuel billionaires to dig and drill and doom all of our children to a future of climate disaster and the scarcity and the wars that it's going to fuel. So I think while the injustices that we face can seem so overwhelming, it's so important to remember that they all stem from the same interconnected system. And that actually is sort of a cause for hope because it means that we don't need to be fighting separate battles against injustice. All of our battles are one. And when we recognize that, we can start building coalitions that are broad enough to actually go up against the billionaires, the imperialists, the warmongers, the people who want us to believe that we're separate. So in reality, Palestine is not the exception. Palestine is actually the mirror. So when we look in that mirror, it asks us, what kind of world are we fighting for? And I guess I hope that we can answer by saying we are fighting for a world, or, answer by building a movement that is dedicated to dismantling all injustice. And then, right alongside that dismantling, I think Palestinians have so much to teach us about rebuilding. And so it's like, what are we going to rebuild? And can we rebuild a world, a community, something that is rooted in care, in dignity, and in our collective survival? Because I think that really is our only hope. We need one another.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you so much for reminding us that all of our struggles are interconnected and that we do need each other. I see, folks are lifting up in the chat that what you said, all of our battles are one. So thank you for reminding us that we are interconnected and our struggles are interconnected, and brings us back to one of the major themes of today is community and solidarity and how we can be in that together. And so I'm going to bring all the panelists back for a quick question before we wrap. Just thinking about, in working on and with the book, what has been a moment of joy and hope? And so we sort of started this conversation in that place of looking to humanity, looking to joy, looking to possibility. And so kind of closing us out with a moment and working on the book, a moment of joy and hope. So I'll pass it to whoever feels ready to jump in.
I mean, I can start and just say, for someone that's been trying to curate work for a long time around how to bring Palestine in the classroom, we actually have a book now. Instead of just being like, oh, go to the website and, you get tired as a teacher looking through everything. Like, we have a book to be like, get this book. Buy the book for your teacher, your kids' teachers, as gifts, donate it to libraries. So I think just actually having it compiled and something that you can hold, and then the beautiful cover and artwork has been something so exciting and uplifting and joyful for me.
Yeah, and I will say that seeing the students struggle and organize, middle school students, high school students, and college students, fighting for Palestine has been incredible. And just to think that our book will help support their efforts really lifts my heart. I mean, seeing the students at San Francisco State win divestment from weapons manufacturers complicit in the war in Gaza, at Brown University, Northwestern, Rutgers, other places, just seeing the power of student organizing and refusing to give in. And I just love the line that's in the introduction to our book that just resonates deeply with me. And it says to step into a classroom is to express confidence in young people's capacity to learn, to grow, to change, to make a difference, to do good in the world. Education is anchored in hope. A book about teaching Palestine is also about teaching hope.
Beautiful. I want to piggyback off Jesse because mine is really similar. But last year, the students in Portland Public Schools organized a walkout for peace, they called it. And it was just so beautiful to see them so organized, so passionate, so fired up, stand so strong in their conviction that genocide is wrong, apartheid is wrong, and they faced so much pushback from pro-Israel folks in the community, and they just stood so strong, and that gave me so much joy.
Yeah, well, there's so many things, but one is just a personal one, and that's with Samia and Susanna and Jesse and Adam coming together in Portland to frame out the book. And it was everyone was thoughtful and warm and serious, and it was just being developed in sort of, we sit in an office or we sit or wherever and we do it as individuals. But really, this is collective work, and we need each other desperately right now. And there's so much, I mean, there's just, this is not this is not anything that we can do alone. And so it was just an example of through the infrastructure of rethinking schools, being able to have people come together and kind of hold hands and metaphorically and do work that matters. And so it was just it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I just want to add to that all the contributors and the artists that put time and effort into this book are such an inspiration. You would think we had an insane art budget for this book, right? Looking through the book. But it's actually because so many people, both Palestinian artists, anti-Zionist Jewish artists, right, either donated or gave us low cost their work because they believed in this project. And I just, I wanted to, I'll lift up one more spread because I think this is a story I learned over the last 19 months, which really is, kind of tremendous. It's the spread to the Gaza chapter, right, which is a heavy chapter in the book. And the opening spread is about how in 2009, this UNRWA-led summer camp, right, the children of Gaza broke a world record by flying 7,000 kites at once. And then a couple years later, there's a Chinese kite flying association broke their record in 2011. But the kids in Gaza wouldn't have it. And the next summer, they went back and they flew over 12,000 kites in one day and still hold that record to this day. And so, I just always thought about that and like the resiliency that they brought to getting, and holding on to that record. That is the resiliency we need to fight for Gazan children every day, right? Every day. And I'm so honored that this book can be a part of that.
Beautiful, beautiful, powerful. And to offer my support, my love, my honor to you all, I'd like to read something from the introduction as well. I think it's important to sometimes share back with folks what they have poured into community. And so you wrote, as educators, we have a moral and an educational duty to expose our students to the human, cultural, economic, and ecological consequences of the war on Gaza. The charge, "Don't stop talking about Gaza," is all over social media. To that we add, "Don't stop teaching about Gaza." Thank you. Thank you for reminding us. Thank you for centering us in teaching about Gaza. As Macklemore started us out thinking about education and how education is really at the helm of passing down this information, of having these critical conversations in the dialogue, of sparking activism and organizing and solidarity in the classroom. This book is going to be an opening experience and an opener for so many educators to be able to introduce this, to also deepen their own teaching and to be supportive, not only to teachers, but also, Bill always says that this is an activism book, this is an organizing book. So we want you all to use the book in any possible way that you can think of. Start a study group, get your comrades together, get your colleagues together, and really study. There's so much in this book that I never learned myself. And as I read through each chapter, I am learning so much. There's so much to learn. And so I'm grateful to that. Thank you, thank you, thank you as we close out. Thank you to the editors of Teaching Palestine for all of the work that you poured into this resource. I'm eternally grateful to Samia, Jesse, Adam, Bill, Susanna. Thank you to everyone who worked on the book, the contributors, the artists who shared their stories. Thank you to Nancy Zucker, who is our art director, for the beautiful ways that she breathed life into this book. Thank you to Macklemore for joining us today as a special guest. Thank you to Crystal and Tierra for ASL interpretation. Thank you to the Rethinking Schools team and Missy for supporting us on the back end with logistics and tech to make sure this event ran smoothly. And so we invite you to purchase a copy of Teaching Palestine Lessons, Stories, Voices. We also have a free downloadable study guide to accompany the book. So again, the plug to get together the group of colleagues, the comrades, the friends, and use the book as a tool for political education and learning. And tonight we are offering a special coupon code. So use code TPALLAUNCH, which is TPALLAUNCH. We'll also drop that in the chat. Use that at checkout for a special discount on the book. And again, thank you to everyone who offered a solidarity donation. Please consider donating to make events like this available to more educators and activists. We are also using a lot of these donations to seed more study groups and more support for study groups. And your donation really directly supports the expansion of our work and helps us get resources to more teachers during these dire times. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for your support and celebrating this book and celebrating being in community together, especially at a time when they are trying to make it so that we do not come together and that we definitely don't have these conversations. So thank you for resisting with us.